1,000 years ago, the Soul Society had defeated an enemy that had threatened the very balance of reality. But suddenly, this threat from the past re-emerges, but this time with an unforgiving vengeance. While the Soul Society has grown comfortable in times of peace, the opposition have been preparing for the last 10 centuries for their inevitable return. The 1,000-Year Blood War arc is the continuation of a long-standing feud between the Quincy and the Shinigami. We were briefly made aware of this during the Substitute Shinigami arc, when Rukia had explained that the Quincy were eradicated by the Shinigami. During this final arc of Bleach, we are introduced to the leader of the Quincy, Juha Bach, the very man who was supposedly killed all those years ago. After making his return, he wastes little time by immediately occupying Hueco and declaring war upon the Soul Society. This final arc begins as it means to go on, as for the first time we are heading for a war that will permanently change the Soul Society and redefine what we know about our protagonist Ichigo Kurosaki. So join me as I begin the first half of my 1,000-Year Blood War arc breakdown and analysis. Before the video begins, only 20% of the people who actually watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. In the first half of my 1,000-Year Blood War arc analysis, I'll be covering material from chapters 480 to 546. So of course, these 67 chapters that I'll be covering are manga exclusive content, because at the time of making this video, the 1,000-Year Blood War arc has yet to be adapted into an anime. So in this video, we'll be going over the Quincy's first invasion of the Soul Society, as well as the aftermath of it, which leads us into their second and final invasion. A lot of notable and key events take place during this part of the story, including Head Captain Yamamoto's battle against Juha Bach, the Bankai of several captains of the Gotei 13 being stolen, the introduction of the Zero Division into the story, as well as the reveal about the true identity of Ichigo's mother and the origin of his powers. This arc begins with the Soul Society's Research and Development Institute detecting that a large number of hollows are being killed. We immediately learn that the only group who are capable of such a task are the Quincy. Not too long after, Ichigo is confronted by a Quincy called Iben, while a group of mysterious masked individuals break into the Serete. They appear within the 1st Division barracks, revealing to the head captain that the Quincy have returned and they are here to declare war against the Soul Society. After this declaration, the Quincy kill the head captain's lieutenant Chojiro Sasakibe before leaving. The masked men tell the head captain that within 5 days the Soul Society will be annihilated by the Quincy's invisible army, the Vanden Reich. Just as quickly as they arrived, the masked men promptly disappear into the shadows, as the head captain's attention turns to his fatally wounded lieutenant. Prior to dying, Chojiro had attempted to tell the head captain that the Quincy are able to do something with their Bankai, but before he can relay this crucial information to him, he succumbs to his injuries and dies. At the cremation of the head captain's lieutenant, we learned that Chojiro had sworn his loyalty to the head captain, promising to stand by his side till his dying breath. The Quincy prove themselves to be unforgiving and merciless. Their motive is well established, and their declaration of war comes with a heavy price. By killing Chojiro, the Quincy have incurred the wrath of head captain Yamamoto. He's even reminded by Mayuri that it is his fault that this is happening, because he had failed to kill that one man 1,000 years ago. As we learn that this individual is indeed Juha Bach, the leader and founder of the Quincy. Within a millennium, he was able to restore himself and bring himself back from the brink of death. While in the shadows, he was also able to build a new army of Quincy, an army that he is using to set his sights on the Soul Society. Meanwhile, in Karakura town, Ichigo activates his Bankai and faces off against the Quincy Iben. He attempts to steal Ichigo's Bankai with a medallion that he is wielding, but he ultimately fails at this. After the Quincy begins to lose his battle against Ichigo, he retreats, and it is at that moment that Ichigo bumps into Nell, who appears to be very distressed. Through her, he learns about the dire circumstances unfolding within Hueco, as the current leader of that realm, Tia Haribel, has been held captive. In order to investigate what is going on, Ichigo and his friends, with the help of Urahara, make their way over to Hueco, but because this time the Quincy may be involved, Uryu decides not to side with the Shinigami, as he opts out of going to Hueco with them. Upon arriving, they find the remains of several Arrancar, as it becomes apparent that they are being massacred by the Quincy. Ichigo discovers the Sternritter Kilgate and begins his battle against him. Ichigo's opponent had been tracking down and killing Arrancars. Juha Bach had relayed to the Sternritters that Ichigo has been designated as a high-level threat. Presumably they are aware of Ichigo defeating Aizen, and thus explaining why he needs to be defeated. Meanwhile, Juha Bach tells his elite soldiers, the Sternritters, to ready themselves to invade the Soul Society, as he goes back on his word and invades the Soul Society before 5 days. Thankfully, the Shinigami had been expecting them, as they have no reason to trust the words of their enemy, but despite their readiness for battle, nothing could prepare them for what was about to unfold. The Gotei 13 immediately mobilize against Juha Bach and his army. Meanwhile, Ichigo's battle against Kilgei takes a turn when the Quincy activates his holy form, but despite this, Ichigo is able to overwhelm his opponent, thanks to him having activated his Bankai. Similar to Iben, Kilgei attempts to steal Ichigo's Bankai, but he too fails at this. Despite Ichigo's minor victory over the Sternritter, the Soul Society on the other hand isn't doing as well, as the Reiatsu of countless Shinigami begins to drop one after the other, as the Quincy launch a relentless assault upon the Serite. They begin to indiscriminately kill the Shinigami and systematically start to destroy the Soul Society. The lieutenants and captains mobilize in order to protect their subordinates, but what they do not know is that the Quincy have a trick up their sleeves, and this will unfortunately give them an unfair advantage over the Shinigami, who we quickly learn have become complacent, as a millennium of peace has softened them and has made them all too reliant upon their Bankai. The Quincy strike the Shinigami at their weakness and steal their Bankai. A notable encounter that occurs here is between Byakuya and Asnot. Through this battle, we see the full extent of a captain's Bankai being stolen and being used against them. Asnot has the ability to instill fear into his opponent, as he unnerves the usually well-composed Byakuya. During the first invasion of the Quincy, 4 captains end up losing their Bankai, of which include Byakuya, Komamura, Hitsugaya, and Soifon. It isn't long before Ichigo and the others learn about what is happening to the Soul Society, as Urahara is contacted by the Soul Society's Research and Development Institute, and he discovers that the Soul Society has been attacked by Juha Bach and his army of Quincy, and frankly the situation is dire. After relaying this information to Ichigo, he takes over the battle against Kilgei, while Ichigo rushes to the Soul Society as a shining ray of hope. Having demonstrated that he is an exception and his Bankai cannot be stolen, his help will be invaluable, that is, if he is able to get out of Huecomundo, as he ends up being trapped in a Reishi prison by Kilgei. While imprisoned, he can hear countless Shinigami being slaughtered on the phone, as he frantically tries to break free from Kilgei's ability. At this moment, Ichigo is able to hear firsthand the devastation that is unfolding within the Soul Society, and while he is momentarily stuck, he is powerless to do anything about it. Kubo is able to powerfully convey the devastation unfolding within the Soul Society and Ichigo's powerlessness through this page where Ichigo is stood in the dark as he hears countless Shinigami being either slaughtered or begging for their lives. Cutting back to the Soul Society, Asnot steals Byakuya's Bankai and uses it against him. In addition to this, he is able to successfully instill fear into the mind of Byakuya. Using Zenbon-Zakura Kageyoshi, he fires it towards Byakuya as his own ability tears his body apart. Asnot reminds Byakuya that he is unable to overcome his Bankai with his Shikai, and that frankly the situation is hopeless for him. There is nothing that he can do here. Byakuya is then assaulted by an endless stream of blade petals. His body is pushed back against a wall as the relentless attack ensues as it forms a crater around Byakuya's body. Beaten and bloodied in what appears to be Byakuya's final moments, he apologizes to both Rukia and Renji before his eyes shut, ending his encounter with Asnot. From one jaw-dropping, devastating battle to the next, we have the head captain join the battle as he arrives to protect his precious children. The figurative father of the Gotei 13 faces off against the leader of the Quincy. When he appears before Juha Bach, he discovers that the leader of the Quincy is holding Kinpachi's lifeless body. As to be expected, Kinpachi had joined the battlefield and had just rushed towards the strongest opponent, but unfortunately his adversary on this occasion was way too much for him to handle. Yamamoto confronts Juha Bach for the first time in 1,000 years. Juha Bach states that seeing the head captain with such an angry expression reminds him of their first encounter. The head captain wastes little time by striking Juha Bach first, but he evades the attack. In retaliation, Juha Bach draws his own sword made out of reishi. The head captain immediately activates his Bankai, Zanka no Tachi. It would appear that this is the second time that Juha Bach is seeing the head captain's Bankai. The head of the Quincy thinks to himself whether if Yamamoto's Bankai has changed in all of these years. After activating his Bankai, a notable change occurs within the atmosphere, as all of the moisture begins to evaporate within the Soul Society. We see Unohana, Ukitake, Hitsugaya, and Shunsui comment on the head captain's Bankai. During this exchange with Juha Bach, we learn that the head captain's Bankai has 4 separate sections: the east, the west, the south, and the final being the north. Through Zanka no Tachi East, the head captain is able to concentrate the flames of his Zanpakuto at the tip of his blade. In this form, anything that the head captain Zanpakuto touches turns to nothing. Even the Quincy's defensive ability witht cannot stand up to it. The next part, Zanka no Tachi West, is activated upon release of one's Bankai. It is an ability that only the head captain can see, and anybody who he chooses to see it. It involves Yamamoto's body being covered in heat, which reaches a temperature of up to 15 million degrees. In this state, it would be impossible to touch the head captain while he is in his Bankai form. Zanka no Tachi South involves the head captain dropping the tip of his sword into the ground, as he literally calls upon the fallen dead, who had died at the hands of Yamamoto's Zanpakuto. These corpses emerge from the ground and fight on Yamamoto's behalf. Among these corpses, Juha Bach is able to recognize his fallen men from a millennium ago. Tragically, these very familiar and former comrades of Juha Bach are now restraining him, as the head captain takes a step back to make some distance between them, as he questions whether if Juha Bach regrets not stealing his Bankai right away. But he corrects himself, as he states that it's not that Juha Bach did not steal his Bankai, it's that he was unable to. The head captain assumes that the Quincy can only steal a Bankai once they understand the full power of it. He elaborates that this is the reason why they fear Ichigo, because he has only recently mastered his Bankai and it is far from reaching its full potential. And similarly, the head captain has not revealed the true form of his Bankai. Even 1,000 years ago, he didn't show his full power. He concludes by stating that this is why the Quincy were unable to steal his Bankai, because the limit of the head captain's Bankai is still unknown. Without hesitation, the head captain activates Zanka no Tachi North, the final true form of his Bankai. He appears to have cut down Juha Bach as a form of revenge for all of the Shinigami that the Quincy had just taken out. Zanka no Tachi North is a single strike of concentrated heat. Anything that this fire touches, it incinerates it out of existence. After making contact with Juha Bach's body, his torso and his arm appear to have been completely removed. Juha Bach collapses to the ground as it appears that he has been defeated. But strangely, after the head captain undoes his Bankai, he witnesses the fallen Juha Bach appearing to apologize to himself. It is here that the head captain realizes that he wasn't facing off against the real Juha Bach, but rather a doppelganger. The head captain had instead defeated a Stenritter called Lloyd Royd, who is able to imitate the memories, form and abilities of another. The head captain turns around to see an explosion erupt from his first company barracks. The real Juha Bach appears before the head captain. We learn that while the head captain was preoccupied by the Stenritter Lloyd Royd, the real Juha Bach had gone to the underground prison in order to recruit Aizen into his ranks, but it would appear that Aizen had declined his offer. Juha Bach then proceeds to steal the Bankai of the head captain, as he states that it's not that they can't steal his Bankai, it's that the head captain's Bankai was too powerful for an ordinary Stenritter to handle, explaining why Juha Bach is the only individual who can hold and contain the head captain's Bankai. Juha Bach then summons a large reishi sword. He bids farewell to head captain Yamamoto as he strikes him from across his shoulder down to his torso. After the top half of his body falls to the ground, Juha Bach refers to the head captain as pitiful, but in a final desperate attempt to fight back, the head captain grabs onto the cloak of Juha Bach. He then cuts Yamamoto's arm off as he steps on his head, stating that he is foolish. He questions why the head captain didn't heal his left arm after his battle against Aizen. He could have had it healed thanks to Orihime's abilities, but he chose not to. Ultimately, it was because of head captain Yamamoto's stubbornness. He didn't want to rely on a human being. Even during the Soul Society's battle against Aizen, he was concerned about involving Ichigo into their battle because he is a human. In the end, the head captain had shouldered the burden of the Soul Society and the human world onto his back, and he had decided to stand before Juha Bach, but ultimately his efforts were futile and he ended up dying. Juha Bach explains that the head captain had become weak due to his own stubborn ethics and morality. Juha states that 1,000 years ago, the head captain used to be so different. The leader of the Quincy describes the original Gotei 13 as a group of bloodthirsty killers, and this is exactly what had made them so fearful. They were far from the noble guardians of the Soul Society. Back then, there were individuals who had striked fear into anybody who had crossed their path. Juha Bach's point here is that the current Gotei 13 is a far cry from that of a millennium ago. The victors of that battle all those years ago had become comfortable, and in their comfort they had softened and grown weaker, and this is the reason why the Quincy was so successful in their ambush of the Soul Society. They had remembered the lessons taught to them from that original Gotei 13, and they had embodied that ruthlessness. The Quincy here are the group of bloodthirsty bloodthirsty killers, and ultimately they had given the head captain a taste of his own medicine, even if it was overdue by 10 centuries. As far as Juha Bach is concerned, the true Gotei 13 died 1,000 years ago, and this current iteration of the Gotei 13 is nothing more than a poor imitation of its predecessors. Yhwach then orders the remaining Sternritters to destroy what's left of the Soul Society. In a brutal, merciless, one-sided attack, they end up killing what's left of the remaining Shinigami, reducing a large portion of the Serite to nothing but rubble. When Ichigo finally arrives within the Soul Society, he meets Byakuya. The bloodied captain tells Ichigo that he is fearful that he won't make it any longer, as he humbly and selfishly asks Ichigo to protect the Soul Society on their behalf. He then confronts the leader of the Quincy, questioning whether if he is responsible for what has happened to the Soul Society. When Ichigo attempts to attack Juha Bach, he is easily overpowered. When he stabs Ichigo's neck, a strange pattern appears, as it seems that Ichigo was somehow able to utilize the advanced Quincy defensive technique Bleach. Juha Bach then brings up the topic of Ichigo's mother, as he comments on how Ichigo doesn't know the truth about her. This has been a running theme for the last 2 arcs. Firstly, when Aizen had commented on Ichigo's nature, when he was interrupted by Isshin and he was unable to complete his sentence, when he had told Ichigo he was a human. It was evident at that point that Isshin has a lot to explain to Ichigo, but Ichigo had respected his father's silence, and he understood that he would hear his father out when the time was right. It also adds to the comments that Ginjo had made about Ichigo's family, when he had told Ichigo that there is a lot that he doesn't know about them. All of the mysteries surrounding the origin of Ichigo's powers and the truth about the death of his mother begins to be unraveled now during this arc, when Juha Bach comments on how Ichigo wasn't able to be confined within Kilge's jail, as it is an ability that was devised to kill enemies and it cannot capture a Quincy, as Juha Bach alludes to the fact that Ichigo has Quincy nature within him. Juha Bach's right-hand man Hashwald ends up breaking Ichigo's Zanbakudo and thus breaking his Bankai. When the two of them leave, they bid farewell to Ichigo, as he states that he will be back for him and that he should heal his wounds, as he refers to Ichigo as his son who was born in the dark. Chapter 514 alludes to the fact that Ichigo's mother is a Quincy, and that Ichigo has a part Quincy nature within him, thus explaining why Juha Bach had referred to Ichigo as his son, as he is the father of all Quincy. After the Quincy leave, the Soul Society is left to deal with the aftermath, as Rukia and Renji are taken into the intensive care unit. Byakuya and Kinpachi have unfortunately fallen into a coma, and there is a possibility that they may never awaken from it. And last but not least, the death of the head captain, their leader, as well as the death of countless Shinigami, leave the Gotei 13 in one of the most utterly devastating situations that we've ever seen them in. They were not only defeated here, they were utterly humiliated, and they have to pay an irreversible price for their defeat, as they have just lost the captain commander, a figure that everybody within the Serite had looked up to. Without any guidance, what on earth will the Shinigami do now? With the overwhelming threat of the Quincy at their doorstep, with the possibility of them returning to the Soul Society to finish off what they had started, the Gotei 13 end up being assisted by the long-awaited arrival of the Zero Division, or the Royal Guard that they are also referred to as. This special organization does not interfere with the affairs of the Gotei 13. Their purpose is not to defend the Soul Society, and it is for this reason that we didn't see them during the battle against Aizen and the Arancars. Their main priority is to fulfill every order of the Soul King, and the authority of the Royal Guard exceeds any authority within the Soul Society. The Royal Guard have intervened because this matter now affects the Soul King. If the Quincy wipe out the Soul Society, then you can be certain that they are going to be heading for the Royal Palace next. So it is for this reason that the Zero Division descend down upon the Soul Society, offering a ray of hope during a utterly bleak and desperate time. I'd mentioned that during the 1000-year Blood War arc, the theme of truth plays a pivotal role. Whether if this is the truth about the death of Ichigo's mother, the truth about the origin of Ichigo's powers, the truth about Old Man Zangetsu and Hollow Ichigo, or the truth about the Quincy's and their sealed king. A king who took 900 years to regain his heartbeat, 90 years in order to regain his reasoning, and a further 9 years where he would absorb the power of the impure Quincy in order to regain his own. These verses were chanted by the Quincy as their final beacon of hope for the return of their king. Juha Bach, after returning, reveals that there is a final verse to this Emperor's song, as he states that after 9 days of returning, the king would conquer the world. Juha Bach ultimately desires to merge all of the realms of reality into one, so that he can rule over them. So now that we know more about the motives of Juha Bach and the circumstances surrounding his return, in particular the verse from his Emperor's song which refers to 9 years which would regain his power as he would absorb the power from the impure Quincy, we learn through the Everything But the Rain flashback arc that Ichigo's mother was an impure Quincy, despite being born pure-blooded. This is because she was an unintentional victim to Aizen's hollowification experiments, as she had been bitten by a hollow that was created by Aizen called witht. This hollow had of course become a part of her, and it was slowly consuming her. That is until Urahara had intervened and explained to Isshin that if he relinquishes his powers and chains himself to Masaki, then he can subdue the hollow witht and prevent Masaki's hollowification. Through the Everything But the Rain flashback arc, which takes place during the first half of the 1000-year Blood War arc, we learn about how Ichigo's parents had met. We learn about how Isshin was the former captain of the 10th Division, but he had no choice but to become an ordinary human. After he had relinquished his powers in order to help Masaki, Urahara had assisted him in setting up a brand new life within the world of the living, after teaching him medicinal information so that he can practice as a doctor in his own clinic. Isshin would eventually marry Masaki and they would have their firstborn Ichigo, and we learned that Ichigo had inherited the hollow witht from his mother, but at the same time he had inherited Shinigami powers from his father. This resulted in the formation of Ichigo's true Zanpakuto spirit, Hollow Ichigo. It is also revealed that Ichigo is a quarter Quincy, and the individual within his inner world who had been representing these Quincy powers was indeed Old Man Zangetsu this entire time. Gradually, Ichigo uncovers the mystery behind his character. When he is unable to submit an Asuchi to his will, Uetsu Nimaya sends him back to the world of the living. It is here that he speaks to his father, and he learns about the true circumstances behind his mother's death, and how it was Juha Bach who had absorbed the powers of the impure Quincy, which had led to Masaki losing her abilities and being unable to protect herself and Ichigo from the Grand Fissure. So indirectly, it was Juha Bach who was responsible for the death of his mother. By stealing her powers, she had no means to fight against the Grand Fissure. When Ichigo returns to Uetsu Nimaya's domain, the creator of the Zanpakuto reveals to him that Old Man Zangetsu is an imposter. He was never Ichigo's Zanpakuto spirit. Instead, he was a manifestation of his Quincy powers, thus explaining why Old Man Zangetsu resembles Juha Bach, because Old Man Zangetsu takes the form of Juha Bach from 1,000 years ago. He is a younger version of the enemy who had just annihilated the Soul Society. He learns about Old Man Zangetsu's true desire, which was to protect Ichigo. For this reason, he had suppressed Ichigo's Shinigami powers, as he didn't want him to follow the path of becoming a Shinigami, because this would lead to him taking part in battles and getting hurt. His desire to prevent Ichigo from getting into harm's way was so much so that he would have killed him in order to prevent him from following the path of a Shinigami. Ichigo questions this younger version of Juha Bach whether if everything that he had told him was a lie. He questions whether if he is really his enemy or his friend. He tells Ichigo that he is neither his enemy nor his friend, and in addition to this, he has never told him anything that would lead him astray. The only lie that he had told Ichigo was his name. This solidifies that he is not Zangetsu, and his inner hollow is in fact Zangetsu. When Ichigo had decided to pursue the path of a Shinigami, young Juha Bach had slowly started to accept Ichigo's decision, as his heart had started to waver seeing Ichigo overcome so many struggles, and before long he would appear imitating Ichigo's Zanpakuto spirit, wanting for him to grow stronger and to progress. Young Juha Bach's desire had changed from protecting Ichigo to wanting to help him and to watch him succeed. This explains how Ichigo was able to utilize Blut Veen, how he was able to stop his blood from flowing during his battle against Kinpachi. These were all the interventions of young Juha Bach. In the end, the manifestation of his Quincy powers steps aside, as he releases all of the restrictions that he had placed on Ichigo's powers, as Ichigo is finally able to wield his true Zanpakuto. After this exchange, Ichigo demonstrates his maturity, as he understands the motives of young Juha Bach. He trusts not only him, but he trusts his inner hollow. This trust that he has is manifested within the two blades that he now wields. One blade which represents his Quincy powers, and the second representing his hollow and Shinigami powers combined. No longer will he ask Old Man Zangetsu for help, nor will he reject his inner hollow, or ask either of them to fight alongside him. Ichigo has come to learn the truth about himself, and he accepts every bit of it, and this is the fundamental growth that his character undergoes during this story arc. Through the Everything But the Rain flashback, and through his training with Uetsu Nimaya, Ichigo's character blossoms into this form that is ready to now face off against Juha Bach. Prior to the second invasion of the Quincy, several other members of the Gotei 13 prepare for their next attack, as Hitsugaya trains with Rangiku in order to master his abilities without relying on Bankai, as Rukia, Renji and Byakuya also recover thanks to the Zero Division and immediately begin training with them in order to strengthen their abilities, and Kinpachi also undergoes training for the first time in his life, as he faces off against the only individual that he had ever respected and admired. This individual is in fact the first Kinpachi, Retsu Unohana. During their battle, Unohana releases all of the subconscious limitations that Kinpachi had placed upon himself, as a result of him weakening himself in order to prolong any battle that he was taking part in. And this had all stemmed from an early encounter between Kinpachi and Unohana, when she had fought against the captain of the 11th Division when he was just a boy. Even at that time, Kinpachi was more powerful than Unohana, but because of the enjoyment that the two of them had during their fight, Kinpachi did not want their battle to end. And in the same way that Unohana had learnt healing in order to prolong her battles, Kinpachi had subconsciously placed limitations upon his abilities so that he could prolong the duration of his battles. This explains why Kinpachi grows stronger after every fight. He had grown stronger after his encounter with Ichigo. He had grown more powerful after he had fought against Noitara and defeated him. And during his training with Unohana, she continues to cut Kinpachi down and to heal him, so that he can come back stronger and stronger. She desires to do so until every limit is removed from Kinpachi's abilities. But as a result of this, Kinpachi is unable to control his own self, as he ends up cutting down and killing Unohana. Despite losing Unohana, the captain of the 11th Division returns more powerful than ever before, ready to face off against the Quincy's return. Another captain of the Gotei 13 who takes drastic measures in order to prepare for the Quincy is Seijin Komamura. He confronts his great-grandfather, who is the elder of their clan. He pleads with him in order to teach the secrets of their clan, but he is ashamed with Komamura, who had decided to side with the Shinigami. Upon hearing this request, the elder laughs in Komamura's face. He hates that Komamura had hidden his face and had pretended to be a human. Refusing to teach the secrets of their clan to Komamura, he challenges him to a fight, and we don't really know the outcome of this battle until the second half of the 1000-year Blood War arc, with Shunsui, the new head captain of the Gotei 13. He takes up the leadership role without even having time to mourn the loss of head captain Yamamoto, and it isn't long before a curtain is cast across the Soul Society, and the entire Serite is replaced by the Quincy city of the Wandern Reich, and thus bringing an end to the first half of one of the most devastating story arcs in the entirety of Bleach, the 1000-year Blood War arc. My next video will be my final entry into the Bleach analysis series, where I will be talking about the second half of the 1000-year Blood War arc, as well as the epilogue of Bleach. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for making it to the end. If you have any comments about anything that I've discussed about the first half of this arc, then definitely continue the discussion in the comments. I can't wait to read all of your thoughts about one of the greatest first halves of any shonen story arc. Let me know what were your expectations going into the second half, and I'd love to hear what your favourite aspects of these first 67 chapters were. So please continue the discussion, and I can't wait to see you in my final Bleach arc analysis video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.